Hello, everybody. It's John Pollock and Phil Chertok. Welcome to the UFC 267 post show live from the post office. It is true. Me and Phil are in person together.
In the flesh, John. I can
flesh.
touch you. Unbelievable. And not only that, we were joined by Wei Ting earlier. Unfortunately, he couldn't stick around.
There was a Wei Ting cameo, but he was scared off by the main event, or else we would have had a third chair here for him to rekindle his passion for mixed martial arts. But we have lots to get into from a rare afternoon card from the UFC. Such an important card that Phil said, you know what? I'm loading up the car with gas and I'm making the trip into town because I'm watching this one on Pollock's couch. So welcome, Phil.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. We hadn't seen a show in a while, and so I put out this suggestion, and we had this afternoon card coming up, so it seemed like the perfect fit. You know, nice to sit on the couch, have a few beers, well, a beer or two, whatever, and enjoy some pretty good fights.
Yeah, so we're going to get into the card. This was a very, I would say, a very intriguing card on paper. If you were in the U.S., this was a free card if you subscribe to ESPN Plus. Us in Canada, congratulations, UFC, you got 65 of our bucks.
Yeah, I mean...
But a good card. I'm not complaining.
Yeah, a good card. We don't have ESPN Plus, and the fact that it was on in the middle of the day is a bonus for me.
Yeah, it's depending on your life circumstances. I'm not complaining that we have an evening card next weekend that we will get to before the end of this show. But I guess our headline tonight is 42-year-old Glover Teixeira is your UFC light heavyweight champion, which is that's a very impactful statement when you state it, and one that I did not expect we would be talking about after this. I thought Glover Teixeira represents a lot of potential problems, but that this was a fight that I certainly did not feel it was going to play out the way it did.
Yeah, I mean, the betting line suggested that. It was
minus 300 favorite was the champion going into this one.
Blachowicz was, as you mentioned, a very big favorite in this one. And, you know, we were talking about this, just sort of reminiscing on things that have happened in the UFC. This was 10 years that John Anik has been in the UFC. It seemed like time flies so fast. And it was 7 years since Glover had lost to John Jones in his first title fight. So it doesn't seem like it was 7 years ago. For him, it probably seems like longer, but the wait was worth it because he delivered in a big way tonight.
It is a remarkable story with Glover Teixeira. Not only somebody that had all of those visa problems that stalled his road to the UFC. He only got there in 2012, gets the title fight with John Jones relatively early in his UFC career, and just worked. And he had some losses along the way, but won his last 5 to get this title opportunity. And here he is, your light heavyweight champion. So going into this one, maybe surprising right off the bat was the ease at which Teixeira was able to get an early takedown in the first round. And that first round largely just played itself out with Teixeira in Jan's closed guard and landed enough that it was a pretty easy round for Teixeira to take. In the second round, you're seeing a much bigger turnaround with Blachowicz establishing his jab. He was fending off takedowns, landing in those uppercuts. And all of a sudden, his back is to the fence, and he sees an opening for a Kimura and just goes to his back and finds himself underneath Teixeira, who just is on top of him, gets to mount, and before you know it, he's got the back, instant rear naked choke, and Jan taps instantly. This was... we were just kind of scratching our heads at what Blachowicz, like you could see what he was trying to do, but it just seemed, man, Phil, the risk versus the reward on that did not really pan out in his favor.
Yeah, it was a very bizarre sequence because Blachowicz had started to do well in this round, recovered, was defending takedowns, as you mentioned, was really timing those takedowns with significant uppercuts, and the fight looked like it was shifting. But then they got placed against the cage, and he got dropped to a knee. And, you know, at first I said he went for a Kimura. I don't know if it was exactly a Kimura, but he was going for wrist control. And whatever that decision was, to go for that wrist control and to fall to his back, it was just a horrible decision. Glover mounted him and then turned him and flattened him out right away, and the tap came. It just didn't seem like he was prepared for that position. It was actually a very odd sequence to end the fight.
Yeah, it was a fight where you knew if Teixeira was able to get Jan to the ground, this becomes a much more intriguing fight. You didn't see a whole lot of dynamic offense from Teixeira in the first round, but his ability to capitalize on that clear mistake from Blachowicz in the second round that is all it took for him, and got Mount with relative ease. I think that's the kind of loss, Phil, that like there are losses that you can take and learn from, and there's other ones that are just going to keep you up at night. And I think this is more the latter for Blachowicz. And you could see, I mean, he just looked devastated after this, and it was just, I think, an error in judgment where he may have seen an opening, but the risk, if that did not pan out, 30 seconds later, your title reign is over.
Yeah, and maybe that had something to do with it, the amount of time left in the round. He thought that he could, safely go for a submission or just, control that wrist. But yeah, I do agree. He'll look back on this one and not be pleased with the idea of him, giving him... As much as Glover did amazing in this fight, it was just such a huge mental error that you cannot forget about it.
So with Glover Teixeira, they identified him the second oldest champion in UFC history, because I don't know if Randy Couture's name is going to make it onto a UFC broadcast, but this creates like a very interesting story with Glover Teixeira. And, Yuri Prohaska, who I think everyone looks at as the next contender, he was brought to Abu Dhabi, weighed in as an alternate if needed, and you would think that is the next fight for the two to make. And with Teixeira, he just celebrated his 42nd birthday this year, so I don't know how much time he's really going to want to be on the sidelines. Like, this is his chance to, I think, get back in there probably in early 2022 and, maximize the years that you do have left here. But it's an interesting story of a 42-year-old who is now your light heavyweight champion.
Yeah, absolutely. He was somebody who came into the UFC with a lot of hype on him. He was known for his ground game, but coming into the UFC, he'd been knocking out a ton of opponents. And, largely his UFC career has been very good. It's just sort of some poor, he lost that John Jones fight, and then, some subsequent losses were poorly timed that forced this to be such an arduous road back to the title. But now that he's here, I do see him wanting to, get those paydays early, and, Yuri's ready. So I wouldn't be surprised if we get maybe a 3 or 4 month turnaround on this.
For Jan Blachowicz, I mean, he, in comparison, we looked at him as like the younger of the two here, but this is a 38-year-old. However, I would say the light heavyweight road back is not as paved with the amount of numbers that the idea of Blachowicz at least contending for the title again in his career, I think is a reasonable hope for him.
Oh, for sure. And even in this fight, like he was
looking good in that second round. Yeah. He made those adjustments. It's just the issue where he ends up underneath Glover was costly, but it did seem he made those requisite changes that if he was able to just, work around those uppercuts and his jabs, like this was going to be more in his favor. That round was looking very good for him.
Mm-hmm. And even though this division is a little bit stronger than maybe it was a couple years ago, there are some more names that have emerged. It's still one of the thinner divisions, so it won't take too many wins to get right back into title contention.
If you are, this was a debate going on throughout the week, and we saw the back and forth between Corey Anderson and Jan Blachowicz. They've split fights over their career, and Corey Anderson actually has a decision victory over Glover Teixeira. Is this an argument you can make if you're Corey Anderson or Bellator that we have the top light heavyweight out there? Corey Anderson still has to beat Vadim Nemkov, but nonetheless, that's your argument.
You can have this. You have the argument, but who's going to listen to it, right? And I don't mean to be rude about it. It's just, Corey Anderson's a tremendous fighter, but he's not going to draw that much because him alone, he's been bland, even though his last few fights have been exciting, and he's in Bellator, and they struggle to promote even the biggest fighters that they have. So, he's a great fighter. Maybe he's the best light heavyweight in the world, but it kind of doesn't matter when you only have one or two other guys to go against.
Yeah, so my correction that the fight with Nemkov had occurred here with Corey Anderson. So Corey Anderson, I think, is someone that Bellator, I mean, they are, I think, going to try and promote this guy as, your elite world-class light heavyweight. I do want to chat about the interim bantamweight title fight. This fight was incredible. They went 5 rounds. I thought this fight was just terrific. And we saw a very close opening round where you could see just the speed from Sandhagen and Jan defending a takedown. But it was just superior striking and speed from Sandhagen, but it was Jan making the adjustments in this fight. As it progressed, we saw Jan, he could not miss with that left hand. He was attacking the body, which was just reddening the rib cage of Corey Sandhagen, and it just became a case of not even Sandhagen necessarily slowing down, just Jan being that much quicker to the punch, and I think finding the timing out of Sandhagen, and that just kind of compounded itself throughout this fight. They went the full 5. I had Jan winning 4 or 5 rounds with Sandhagen taking the first, and that's how all 3 judges scored it. But this was a tremendous performance by Petr Yan. They identified him as now a 2-time UFC bantamweight champion, which, I mean, this is an interim championship, so let us not forget that this means you're essentially the number 1 contender to the champion, no matter what the circumstances were of Sterling winning that championship. But we have Petr Yan as your winner.
Yeah, this was an amazing fight. Much like Sandhagen's earlier loss this year to TJ Dillashaw, this is pretty much the highest level of MMA that you're going to get. Very close fight, very good first round by Sandhagen. He had the edge, but as the fight progressed, Jan just got slow, just edged him more and more. And as Sandhagen slowed down just a touch, Jan was able to get that timing, start landing, and it started to add up. By the time we got to the 5th round, it was a little bit crazy. That round was a little bit closer, but Jan really started to put it on him. I think the efficiency, he was landing at close to almost like 40% towards the end of the fight. Sandhagen was game. He was in it the whole time. It just seemed like he couldn't generate enough power to get Jan to respect him. So by the time Jan was able to figure out the timing, it didn't really even matter if Sandhagen was going to be able to connect, because Jan wasn't really worried about it.
Yeah. To me, it was... Corey Sandhagen is a bantamweight that I think he is an elite level 135 pounder. We just saw the difference tonight between someone like Petr Yan, who I think we saw just a really disciplined performance over 5 rounds that was not discouraged by that first round. It was a close round, even with Sandhagen winning. But I thought that this was Petr Yan that I think lived up to where everyone sees him in this bantamweight division. And I think that when Aljamain Sterling is healthy enough to compete, that's obviously the fight you make. And the only question now is when Sterling is ready to come back, and if Yan is going to fight in the interim.
Yeah, I'm not, you say it's obviously the fight to make. I'm not entirely sure. I mean, maybe you go to Dillashaw first just because of the interest. I mean, obviously there's that natural storyline that you want to close out on the Aljamain thing. And Aljamain himself, these circumstances are not his fault. So he deserves his title shot, his title defense opportunity. But we don't know how long he's going to be. And if TJ Dillashaw is there, TJ Dillashaw is also a legit number 1 contender after that Sandhagen fight. So I wouldn't be shocked if we see that first.
No, it's, when you're talking about a neck injury that Sterling is recovering from, I mean, there's just going to be, that's going to be a tough injury to come back from that. I don't know if you can necessarily just estimate what the timetable is going to be like. Bantamweight is a red-hot division, and you've got some really big fights in that weight class coming up in the near future. So the idea that Jan takes another fight in between that, I think ultimately you do get to this Sterling fight, but there's not going to be a shortage of contenders coming up.
And we did notice in the last month or so, a former bantamweight champion started to reemerge in the MMA sphere. And yes, he's calling for a fight at featherweight, but Henry Cejudo would be a wonderful addition. I would love to see Jan versus Cejudo. Forget Dillashaw, forget Aljamain. Let's go straight to Cejudo and do that one, because that's a really exciting fight. Cejudo versus Jan, sign me up.
This fight was incredible. This was, to me, the fight of the card. It was a tremendous 5-round fight that you were looking for here. So Petr Yan is your interim bantamweight champion, 1-time bantamweight champion, and now has an interim title reign under him. Let's move on to the lightweight division, where Islam Makhachev was taking on, I think, his toughest opponent to date in Dan Hooker, who I mean, I was reading off these names to you, Phil, that since 2018, this is the level of competition Dan Hooker has fought. Gilbert Burns, Edson Barbosa, James Vick, Ally Quinta, Paul Felder, Dustin Poirier, Michael Chandler, and then just last month at 266 fighting Nasrat Haqparast before he comes back immediately to fight Islam Makhachev. That is just an unbelievable level of competition that you are preparing for on a every single camp. So this made this win all the more impressive. Makhachev used a right hook to set up the immediate takedown, answering a lot of questions right there, seamlessly moves to half guard, and then you saw him just working for the Kimura, puts his leg over the head to get the full pressure on the Kimura, and as he twisted, he got the submission in 2:25 of the first round. I did not think this would be such a dominant performance from Makhachev. And I mean, do you come away with this with more questions answered, or is this still something that you still have some for Makhachev's ultimate? Because we got to see 225 of him. It was an incredible 225, but I don't know what you take away from this in terms of his absolute upward mobility, other than he finished an incredibly difficult guy with ease.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly answers some questions about what his role is in the top 10, right? He was ranked number 5 or number 6 going into this fight, even though he hadn't beaten anyone in the top 10. So now you can definitely say he deserves a spot there. It is such a dominating performance that it does leave question about who could deal with this, especially in a division that does. I mean, you do have some wrestlers in there, right? You've got Gaethje and Chandler, but it just seems like it's on such a higher level. Of course, it was very short, so we didn't get a ton of time to see what he could do. But, I mean, I'm pretty sure he's ready for anybody in the division. I mean, I'd favor him versus the champ right now.
Well, yeah, you and I were talking a lot about the potential of Makhachev next. So to just paint the lightweight picture, of course, the title fight is in December, where you have Charles Oliveira and Dustin Poirier. Next weekend is Michael Chandler and Justin Gaethje, another huge fight. I would say we're talking about a division of those four and Makhachev, and that just the outcomes of those fights are going to set up our major lightweight fights.
Beneil Dariush would like a word with you, John.
Okay, Dariush has a deceptive win streak that nobody talks about this guy at 155 pounds. And if I'm Islam Makhachev, I don't know if the fight with Beneil Dariush is the most appealing on paper of someone who's a very difficult out, but also someone that is coming with less than zero notoriety with his fights.
Yeah, that's the big thing with Dariush is that, as you say, he has not much notoriety. Well, you say he has none. He did pick up some with his last win. The Tony Ferguson fight was a big fight. He also had his bizarre post-fight speech that everyone can remember. So he's making a name for himself. But yes, in terms of notoriety, definitely not the biggest name, but he's higher ranked, and it's a way to just sort of skip right to that title shot with the win.
We were also talking about the fact, like, if you did not have, number one, a disaster of an individual outside of the octagon, plus you have the injury he's recovering from, just given the history with Khabib, that is a natural opponent for Conor McGregor, that I think would engage a lot of people based off the fumes of that feud and rivalry. However, I don't even look at Conor McGregor right now as an active option in the UFC at this point.
Yeah, I mean, look, I would say you can't even imagine him fighting until, roughly a year since that last one. And the opponent list, it needs to come down. It needs to be closer to the cowboy side of things.
Yeah, that's a horrible fight for Conor McGregor for many reasons. But I think it would be a big fight just based off of everything involved. And to be quite honest, is that a fight that Islam would hold a similar opinion about as Khabib, of not even wanting that fight? Yeah. I mean, these are, that is a group that we have seen the motivation is not just strictly financial.
Yes.
And Conor McGregor, they may just look at, where does that guy get us? Just looking from a pure ranking sports perspective.
Yeah, I also think if you're the UFC, you don't want to do that one because it's just Conor's so far off from being able to win it. I think you want to put him into a fight that he has a chance to win.
I don't know. We saw Dana was literally with Khabib, hey, You know how much dude, I think Dana makes that fight. Well, that's the closest he can get.
Okay, Khabib, that's different because that's the biggest fight they could possibly put on. But there's bigger Conor fights than Islam, right? A Dustin fight, a Nate fight, even a Tony Ferguson fight, theoretically. So, anyway, I don't want to talk about that guy anymore.
Well, Islam Makhachev, an enormous win here over Dan Hooker, and it will be a big fight he has at lightweight, whether it be Beneil Dariush or more.
Amazing, though, that this was the second best wrestling performance on the card.
That's true. We do have to talk about this heavyweight fight. This was Phil's fight tonight. Marcin Tybura and Alexander Volkov going a long 3 rounds. Volkov winning the first and third round, while Tybura, did enough damage in the second round where it was more just Volkov just kind of being a witness during this round and just kind of absorbing. Not a very spirited performance. I wouldn't say you come away with this salivating over any heavyweight matchups that this creates. But Volkov gets the win, scores of 30-27 twice and 29-28, ending a 5-fight unbeaten streak for Tybura, which included 4 fights last year. Incredibly active during the pandemic. But Volkov, he had been coming off a loss to Cyril Gane here, so bouncing back, or actually had bounced back with the wins over Walt Harris and Alistair Overeem over the past year. Do I have this right? No, he is coming off the Gane loss.
Yeah, that one was, quite a while. It was only in June. Oh, wow. Okay. That was pretty recent then. Volkov, he's a very skilled guy, not terribly exciting. He looked bad for him here. It looked like he was making some big mistakes and letting Tybura back into the fight, but he was able to put it together, use mostly just strong technique, just sharp 1-2s and getting out of the way. And that was enough to get the W.
Yeah, the big thing that the announcers were on were the takedown defense of Alexander Volkov. Man, 13 for 13. I mean, that was the fight. Incredible takedown defense.
I mean, Tybura's no Curtis Blades.
Yes. But Khamzat Chimaev making his long-awaited return. This was after it was identified, I think the wording on the broadcast was medical setbacks. Yes, this man had a brutal battle with COVID-19 to the point that he was looking to end his career and not come back. But he came back in a big way here, defeating Li Jingliang in 3 minutes and 16 seconds. So, I mean, this guy he lifts up with a waist lock and takes Jingliang and dumps him in front of Dana White, who he starts communicating with. Just total control here. He moves to the back, sinks in a rear naked choke, and Jingliang, he is refusing to submit. He is ready to go out. Chimaev just adjusted positions with the arm, and then Jingliang went out cold at 3:16 of this first round. Utterly dominant performance from Chimaev. He, of course, burst onto the scene. He won 2 fights in 10 days in July of last year, followed up with the Gerald Meerschaert win in September of last year, but has not competed for 13 months. He looked incredible here.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the most anticipated returns in a long time. A lot of questions, especially about his health. We didn't get to see him go long, but for what we saw, it was just complete domination. And, just to a little bit on that waist lock, he was talking to Dana while he was holding the waist lock. So he's got Jingliang elevated and he's talking to Dana. Lang's just like panicking. Chimaev's calm as a cookie. Then he dumps him, controls position, constantly going for the finish. Lang defending, but always on to the next move for Chimaev. Just complete dominant grappling. Extremely impressive.
He was asked who he wants to fight next. He said everybody.
At the same time?
Everybody simultaneously. Don't space them out. Any weight class, he will take them on. And he told Dana White, watch my fights. Don't be on your phone.
Yeah, that's right.
Those were his words for Dana.
I guess that's what he said. He was yelling at him. He saw him on his phone. So he said, hey, watch my fight.
He's an incredibly captivating personality with a style that is going to win over any viewer that tunes into him. I would still like to see him in a longer fight so we see a bit more from him. But Li Jingliang is not a pushover in any sense of the imagination. So, I mean, he passed this with flying colors. And I think that, certainly he is back and is going to be programmed accordingly in this welterweight division. I hope he kind of just chooses his weight class and sticks to it. I mean, he has the ability to go back and forth, but I think for optimization of your career is just focus on welterweight and move forward, because this is the kind of performance and individual that I think he's going to command some big fights in 2022. He is certainly one of the fighters to watch next year.
Absolutely. Had a little bit of weight issues making this, so I think sticking to the weight class and honing in on the weight cut would be key. And look, he took no damage. He seemed last year to want to fight frequently. Hopefully he can do that again, and we'll see him back in there maybe even before the end of the year. I would not be surprised.
This is a guy that he wanted to be active. It was COVID that kept him out for all that time, and I could imagine wants to make up for lost time. But we're going to see. Like, this is the kind of fighter that you can always see. It's just like the arrow to Dana White's heart that I will fight often, entertainingly, and be a captivating personality. And I think they really see that in a star building type of fighter that he represents. And the main card, it opened up with Magomed Ankalaev and Volkan Ozdemir, who was a plus 250 underdog. They went the 3 rounds here, and this was just a pretty solid performance turned in by Magomed Ankalaev, who got dropped in the first round, but came back, I thought, doing enough to win the first round. This would have been the closest one. One judge had it 29-28. I would suspect it was the first, because in the second, it was Ankalaev getting the takedown and just destroying this guy's left eye after a check right hook. In the third, Ankalaev with a big flurry and just kept Ozdemir at distance. It was a clear win here for Ankalaev. 30-27 twice and 29-28, as he has now won 7 straight. And after he kind of got tied to Iwan Kutalaba with those 2 fights where they had to run it back, it kind of put him just on the sidelines for a bit. And this is certainly a light heavyweight that I don't think gets often mentioned among the contenders, but he certainly won. This is a guy in Ozdemir that has fought for the title in the past, and Ankalaev, as you said, it's not a super deep division that he should catapult himself up into that mix where they are searching for contenders.
In terms of skill level, this is definitely a win that puts him right up there. He should be going up against, the toughest guys. Hey, maybe Blachowicz is a good opponent next, coming off of that loss. The only thing is he's just not well known, and he hasn't had a lot of exposure, so he's going to have a little bit of a longer go to get there. But because, again, as we mentioned, not a lot of contenders, he can probably get there pretty quick and definitely has the skills. So this is somebody who I'm pretty sure we're going to see challenge for a title next year.
And then the quick results here. Did not see all of the prelims. Saw a bit of it. We will talk about one glaring instance here of officiating on the undercard. But Amanda Hebos defeated Virna Jandiroba by unanimous decision, 29-28 scores. Zubaira Takugov over Ricardo Hamos by unanimous decision, 29-28. Albert Duraev over Roman Kopylov, 30-27, 29-27, 29-27, another unanimous decision. Elijah Zaleski dos Santos defeated Benoit Saint-Denis by unanimous decision, 29-26 across the board. I saw some 29-25s in this. There was a point deduction in the third, but this second round in particular is a round that is going to be heavily scrutinized coming out of this weekend. There was an official, not a regular official that you see on the UFC broadcast, by the name of Vyacheslav Kiselev, who was actually removed from his officiating duties for the remainder of the night. This second round was an atrocity. John McCarthy, of all people, think of the ground this covers and the rounds this man has observed in his lifetime, called this the worst officiating job in the history of the UFC. It was uncomfortable how long this went. There are times that I do give the benefit of the doubt when you're in the heat of it as a referee. You don't want to do it too early. And sometimes we will see like it's a dominant performance, but there's not that moment to step in. There were multiples of it in the second round. I had some people calling this a 10-7 round. I don't think that's egregious. Saint-Denis did come back at the end of the second and did land a bit, but it should never have gotten to that point. And I always remember one of the quotes that John McCarthy has given about a 10-7 round about the reason there aren't too many of them, because a fight should really never get to that point where you have to score it a 10-7. It should be over by that point. This was certainly the case, and I think they made the right call removing this referee. It was a pretty bad deal.
It sounded pretty bad. I mean,
you had fighters online who are going to be the ones, I think, with the longest latitude when it comes to a stoppage that were just appalled by this.
You know who wasn't on that list?
Who was that?
Dominic Cruz. Fortunately for me, I didn't see this one because I was in transit. But
you should go back and watch this second match.
Well, when I came in the door, I mean, this was like top of mind for years, so it sounded pretty atrocious. And, good on the UFC and Abu Dhabi for making the correct call to get him out of there.
This guy's probably not getting the call back for a future event. Michal Olekshechuk defeated Shamil Gamzatov by TKO 3:31 of the first round. Lerone Murphy knocked out Makwan Amirkhani at 14 seconds of the second round. This is Amirkhani's third loss in a row. For someone that was a rising prospect at 145 pounds, he's fallen on a rough stretch.
And this one was one of the roughest because he dominated the first round with grappling. It wasn't even close, and then he just telegraphed the takedown in the second round, and he got hit with this knee. And this knee was very scary. He was out on the ground for a long time. He recovered, seems okay, so that's good. But a very brutal loss, and especially brutal because he was dominating it.
That's unfortunate. Andre Petrosky submitted Hu Yao Song by arm triangle, 4:46 of the third round, and then Tagir Ulanbekov won a split decision over Alan Nascimento, 29-28, 2 in Ulanbekov's side, and one for Nascimento. And that was our card from Abu Dhabi. I would say, only seeing the main card, but it was a real highlight was Jan and Sandhagen. That was my fight of the card, and it seems like the most egregious officiating job of the year on top of it. So that's what you got at UFC.
And look, it wasn't the greatest fight because we were talking about the Blachowicz sort of, fight IQ disappearance, but respect to Glover Teixeira, legend of the game, guy never quit to keep at this sport despite years of injuries, beatdowns, defeats, and as a 40-year-old to put in the work every day to become a champion. Even if he's not your favorite fighter, even if you wanted Jan to win this, you gotta tip your hat off to this guy. Just really inspirational. You love to see it. I'm 39. Maybe I still have a chance to be a UFC champion.
You could be. And now the light heavyweight debate is on. And to make my own correction, I have all these tournaments going on in my head. So it was Corey that had just beaten Ryan Bader. So we do have the Corey Anderson Vadim Nemkov final still to come. But there you go. That was the card. And just looking ahead, we're going to be back. Phil and I, 2 weekends in a row. We are going to be
but I think we'll keep our distance for the next.
I don't expect enough. Phil's not going to be coming over for a Saturday night card. Let's be realistic here. But this is an awesome card next Saturday. They're returning to Madison Square Garden. We have the rematch between Kamaru Usman and Colby Covington. This is almost 2 years removed from their last fight. But in those 2 years, I think Usman has made such significant advances in his career. We got to see his striking on point that night with Covington. I mean, he won that fight with his striking. And since that time, what he has done has been remarkable with Henry Hooft. Colby Covington's had one fight in that time, and that was the Tyron Woodley fight. So we know Covington's conditioning is at an ultra elite level. But man, you are really going to have the best performance of your career against Kamaru Usman next Saturday. And I just think that Usman is that much better from that first fight that they had, which was an amazing fight.
Yeah, it was a great fight. And I agree with your assessment. I just sort of see like skill for skill, they're very comparable, but it's very similar styles, and Kamaru's just a little bit better in each of those departments. So I just don't see really what area Colby's going to be able to get the W with unless he's able to, land a shot that's able to change the course of the fight.
Do you see it being a different fight from the first, just in terms of like that, like strictly a stand-up striking affair?
I do think it'll be mostly a striking affair because I don't think Colby's going to want to wrestle. Maybe Kamaru chooses to wrestle a little more, but I just don't see Colby wrestling. So I see something very similar to the first one, which is really exciting because that was pretty good.
It is going to be a bit of a reversal because, for Ben Askren, the amount of highlight film he had to see for every UFC promo where he was eating that knee. Mm-hmm. How many times are we going to see that knockout of Masvidal over the next week?
Yes.
Because that thing is going to be shown. That is visually one of the most stunning knockouts you're going to see. Almost at par with the Sandhagen Frankie Edgar one that we got to see several times tonight. Rose Namajunas and Zhang Wei Li in a rematch for the women's strawweight title. Going back to the arena where Namajunas won the title back in 2017 and got the infamous Thug Rose call.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not super excited about this rematch immediately because the first one was so dominant, but it's also, there's not a ton of options in this division. So hopefully Zhang can make some adjustments and it'll be a more competitive fight this time.
Michael Chandler and Justin Gaethje, which, hard to really pinpoint. This could be, just lay and pray. This is like what, I don't know. I hope the crowd is still into it after this fight. Outside of Michael Chandler having another freak nerve injury like he did with Brent Primus, I don't know how this is not going to be just fireworks for as long as it lasts. I'm not going to venture to... Actually, in the same arena where Chandler suffered that injury with Brent Primus.
Oh, that was in MSG.
That was at the Garden.
Oh, okay.
So, interesting. But nonetheless, what a fight that we've got, and should be spectacular, and very, very well could be a championship fight for the winner coming out of this.
I think so. It seems to really set it up, because the Poirier Oliveira fight's happening very soon.
The following month, yeah.
Yeah, so it certainly leaves that opportunity, and a Gaethje versus Poirier rematch, that'd be pretty exciting. That was a good fight.
Shane Burgos, Billy Quarantillo, and Frankie Edgar against Marlon Vera. This fight is probably going to fly under the radar, but that's a huge fight for Frankie Edgar, and a very tough opponent for him and Vera. This is his first fight since the Sandhagen knockout.
Yeah, he's, the last couple of years have been rough. He's had some pretty brutal knockout losses. There was the Ortega one as well. Marlon Vera's looked pretty good, but he's sort of had just some flat performances in the octagon. This is kind of one of those fights that is Frankie Edgar still able to compete with the top of the division? And, can Marlon Vera, cement his spot in the top 10? That you actually go take a look at Shane Burgos there? Yeah. When was his last that fight to...
So he's coming off the Barboza loss. That was in May.
Yeah, that was the delayed knockout. I guess, it's been 6 months. I don't know. I'm just always...
His last win was Makwan Amirkhani 2 years ago.
Yeah, I'm just always concerned when guys come back after such a brutal knockout. But it has been quite a few months, so I'm probably just being a suck.
And we've also got the Bellator Lightweight Championship will be decided next week.
Is that the other big one?
Peter Queally and Patricky Pitbull fighting for that vacant title.
Well, you got a Pitbull brother on there. But it's also, we've got Canelo versus Plant.
How are you going to do this on Saturday night?
Well, I'm going to try to do what I did for Canelo versus... oh my gosh, what was the Russian fighter he knocked out? Because we were watching. That was a pay-per-view that night. That was Masvidal versus Diaz.
Right. This is where they had the whole delay.
Yes. So I was able to sort of have the main event going while we were doing the show, and I sort of called the knockout.
Do you see any kind of similarity where they're going to avoid going against each other?
I think that they are, but it's not going to be a situation where they're sitting around waiting. I think they're just going to time it to be the main event.
That card's in Vegas?
Yes, okay. It's in Vegas. Or is it in Texas? I'm not sure. But they're going to time it so it's at the end of the you're not going to see Canelo sleeping on a couch again.
Yeah, so next weekend it is at the MGM Grand. So
okay.
It is a Vegas card.
And it's a pretty exciting. Canelo's a pretty big favorite over there. And, his opponent is pretty good, very skilled boxer, but Canelo's...
They've got those press conference highlights going on all week, so that's great.
Yeah, but, it's he's best pound for pound for a reason. He's been incredible. His only loss is to Floyd Mayweather, and that was several years ago. So if you're not going to watch the UFC, I'd recommend picking up this boxing card.
So yes, you will get another UFC post show next weekend. We'll be live here at youtube.com/postwrestling to go over all of the action from UFC 268. Some other fight nights coming up. The week after that is Max Holloway, Yair Rodriguez, Misha Tate, and Ketlin Vieira on November 20th. Rob Font and Jose Aldo December 4th. And then we've got the final pay-per-view of the year with 269 December 11th with Oliveira Poirier and Juliana Pena challenging Amanda Nunes. These, like, what we're seeing now is like the fight night.